So let's take a look at V-Ray multi-mats. I'm going to go to File, Open. I'm going to open up our Utility Passes version 1 start. So I'm just going to take a quick render to see what we got. I'm going to hit IPR. So pretty simple scene, but what we want to do is essentially render out RGB mats for our teapots here, our cubes, and our set. And that'll give us control if we want to start tweaking this shader. Say we want to shift this from an orange to a red or a yellow to an orange. In comp, we're going to be able to have control over to do that. So to do that, we use these things called multi-mats. It's a built-in RGB mat system that V-Ray has. So I'm going to jump over to my Render Elements tab and drop in a multi-mat. So I'm going to rename this node to RGB mat underscore teapots, just like that. And what I'm going to do is copy and paste this name into the file name suffix. And this is the node name. This is the name of the channel that is actually going to show up in Nuke. So multi-mats work on 3 different ways. You can do them on shaders, you can do them on objects, or you can do them on sets, specifically V-Ray object property sets. I always default to doing them on a per shader basis. That gives you a lot of flexibility, specifically in areas like this. Say we want to render out a map for this green shader. Having to manage the process of these object IDs here, if we wanted to create them on a per object basis, say we get an update from the modeling team and they added more cubes to the scene, essentially what we'd have to do is go back through and make sure that all the cubes that we're ingesting into the look development pipeline has all the object IDs up to date. And that can get very problematic and get very, there's a lot of room for error in that process. So doing them on a per shader basis kind of alleviates that headache. You just assign your shader to the incoming objects that you get from the team and you're done with it. You don't have to worry about it. So with that said, let's take a look at shader IDs. So how this works is we tag our multi-mat with these ID numbers. So we can do 1, 2, and 3, and then essentially what we're going to do is tag our shader IDs with those same IDs. So I'm going to minimize that, select our teapots, go to Windows Node Editor, and then graph all those shaders. And then what we can do is jump into each shading group here, go up to Attributes, V-Ray Material ID, and then we can tag those with the same IDs. So we can do 1, Attributes, V-Ray Material ID, 2, Attributes, V-Ray Material ID, and then give that a 3rd. And now if we refire by IPR, and then we see our RGB mat underscore teapots shows up there. And you notice nothing happens. What's going on? If we jump back into our render elements, we have to actually tell it to use shader ID. So by default, use material IDs is off. But if we click that on, stop out of IPR, and then refire that up, we'll notice that we have access to our RGB mats then. So the next way to do it is to do on a per object basis. Say we want greater control than just shaders. You know, we got these green cubes here. We got our shader ID, but what we want is an actual ID for each individual cube. In that case, you'd have to do them on a per object basis. So I'm going to add in multi-mat, rename this underscore RGB mat cubes. Copy and paste that into our file name suffix right there, and then what we'll do is tag this with 4, 5, 6, and then we'll just leave use material IDs off. And then to tag the objects with these IDs, what we can do is select each cube, make sure that we're on our transform node. I'm going to stop RT really quick. Go to Attributes, V-Ray Object ID, and then give the object ID right there. So Again, that's select the cube, make sure we're in the transform node. Attributes V-Ray object ID 5, and then attributes V-Ray object ID 6. And now if we refire up IPR, we're now going to have this cube's RGB map. So the last way we can do multi-mats is doing them with V-Ray object properties. So I'm going to cancel out of IPR, go into multi-mats, append that underscore RGB mat, and we'll just call this set for our set back here. We can do 7, 8, and 9 for our object IDs, and then what we can do is select our tubes, go to create V-Ray object properties, apply single object properties to node selection. Then we get the set down here, and you notice that our tubes have been added. What we'll do is call this tubes underscore pop, standing for V-Ray object properties. And then we're going to talk about the V-Ray object properties again in a later lesson when we start talking about render layers, but just to touch up on the object ID part of it, if we enable this object ID and we give it an ID right there, what this is telling V-Ray is to, if this has any kind of object IDs on the object or the transform, ignore them and respect the object ID that we see here. So override object ID, leave to 7, and then if we select our set, we'll go to create V-Ray object properties, apply single object properties to node selection. Then we'll do set underscore V-Ray object properties. Then we'll do override object IDs, and we'll set that to 8. So I'm going to render this. And if you notice that our new RGB mat is called multi-mat. So that happens when we don't change this file name suffix here. So in this case, I just changed the node name, which is the node that lives inside of Maya, and then this is a name that actually gets set up in our channels here that we'll see inside of Nuke. So if I step out of this, hit IPR again, we're going to have access to our set RGB map right here. So now that our RGB mats are set up, what I'm going to do is import a render elements preset that we made, and then what we're going to do is select our multiplication divide preset and bring that into our scene as well. And then from there, we'll just give this image a render, and then once you're done rendering it, we'll just save. And then we'll save that out as, I'm saving this out as utility passes version 1. I already have it saved out, so I'm just going to cancel out of that. And then let's jump over to Nuke. So I'm going to go to File, Open. We're going to jump into our Chapter 5 multi-mat start. So set our project really quick to relink up all of our nodes. And then just make sure that we set our knob defaults, just like that. So I'm going to drop in a shuffle node, and we're going to shuffle out our RGB mats. So you notice we had our RGB mats and our beauty passes, our beauty render elements rather. Let's take a look at RGB mats teapot. So say we want to colorize this white teapot right here. What we can do is just take whatever channel we're working with, so in this case red, and then we'll select red in all those channels. And what that'll do is just move the red into the alpha. So if I drop in a gray node, plug that into our beauty pass, take our mask and pump that into our teapots shuffle, what we can do is start put a multiply to this. So if we go to our multiply color wheel, we can start to colorize this just like that. So say we want to affect our cubes there. Let's do the same thing. We'll go to shuffle. Shuffle out our cubes. So say we want to affect all these cubes together. We don't just want to affect one individually. In this case, we can combine these mattes using an expression node. So I'm going to tab, type in expression. So this expression node can be another intimidating spot within Nuke. I'm not expecting anybody to come in and out of this lesson and to be an expression master. We will get into this a little bit more, but overall, you don't really have to be an expression master to get use out of this. Basically, I'm going to show you guys a couple techniques that you can just keep in your back pockets, and you can just use it on those few occasions. So with that said, how this works is we're doing our channels that we're entering here, and that's going to equal whatever we enter here. So in this case, what channels we want is all of them. So RGBA, so not just the RGB, we're affecting the alpha as well. And what that'll do is highlight our red and green and blue right there in our alpha as well. And what those are going to equal to are red plus green plus blue. That's the expression. That's it. And what that'll do is combine all of those. Without doing it this way, you'd have to actually do a couple different shuffle nodes, and you'd have to add them together, and that gets kind of tedious. So I like to do it this way. With that said, if we go back to our tree here, and if we drop in a color correct, so I'll tab color correct, plug that into our tree, and then we'll do our mask to our cubes over here, and then what we'll do is desaturate that, and then I'll drop in another grade node, and then take our mask again, and then we'll colorize that just like this. So with that said, they're turning out pretty flat, and that's primarily because we're affecting all of the channels together. We're not actually going in and just affecting the diffuse color, so we're kind of colorizing the reflection, the specularity as well, and we don't actually want to do that in this case. So what I'm going to do is move this over, just like this, and then what we can do is actually import our rebuild presets. So if we go to File, Insert Comp Nodes, go to our presets, and then we'll just do Beauty Rebuild Hybrid, and then we'll just set that in place just like that, and then we'll just make sure we're not affecting that tree. So now that we got this built, what we can do is copy and paste this over to this tree and just affect this flat diffuse color and not actually affect the reflection or the specularity at all. So what I'm going to do is Control left click and drag upwards. What that does is it's a really nice handy way, especially if you're working with this vertical workflow. It'll just move your tree up like that. So again, that's Control left click, and then if we paste that, we'll plug that into our diffuse, and then we'll move our multiply down. So now this is our diffuse before, after, and then we got our raw lighting, and then we're multiplying in our diffuse like that. And now as we go down, you notice our reflection doesn't get flattened out like that. So that's before, and that's after. And say we want to take this to the next level, and we actually want to fix some of this color bleeding that's happening here. Notice like right here on the floor and right there. What we can do is take this matte that we made and come up here and fix our color bleeding that's actually happening in our raw GI. So I'm going to paste that, drop in another color correct, and then pump that matte into our mask. We're going to desaturate that, which fixes all this stuff. But you notice we still got this stuff that's happening on the edge right here. But what we can do is if we drop in a erode filter, and then we'll set the channels to RGBA, and then we'll dial this down, which essentially extrudes that out, just like that. You can see it just kind of extruding away. And then what I'm going to do is drop in a blur node, so tab blur. And if we come over here and take a look at this, and we blur that out, what we'll do is we're just feathering that so that we don't end up with a hard edge over there. Then if we check out before and after, we're getting a much better result than what we were getting over here with our flat way of working. where it's affecting the specularity and the reflection in the PD paths altogether. So with that said, what if we want to start taking this to the next level and start to do things like swapping out this texture back here? You can't really do it just with colorizing. We'd have to actually do it with a UV map and some other utility passes. So in the next lesson, what we're going to do is start talking about other utility passes like UV maps and depth maps and motion vectors.